gathered here in the middle of the monsoon, and the grey partridge is of course very appropriate. But what Haridang would have wanted us to do is not be here in the middle of the heat in Delhi. He would have wanted us to be up in the mountains. So, as the exhortation of St. Paul's School, upward the old school calls and away from the low and steamy plains. So here we are all sitting here, and whether we are Paulites or Doscos or Stephanians or Air Force School, whatever, Centralians or Tapsites, we are all sitting here because we all have a common set of grounds: mountains, Haridang, education, fondness for the outdoors, some perhaps coming from a shikar background and having landed headfirst into a conservation arena. So all of us are here for these various reasons, and Himraj has put together this fantastic effort, and he's sort of proved to us that you can sort of work with Haridang-esque sense of perfection, which is the reason why this book was not published 40 or 50 years back, and Himraj has made it happen now 55 years back. And I guess you just, there's one way of doing it is not do it because it's not good enough, and you think it's not good enough and you have to do it better. Or like the rest of India today, you just have to do it because you're not good enough, but just having done the product is what works. So I mean, sometimes it's reaching the finish line that works. So Himraj has helped our father reach the finish line, and he's done a great job with this book. So let's get on with the job, and we've got some very fine folks here who are all colleagues and veterans, all of whom have had wonderful and terrible and unhappy and happy experiences with Haridang in the mountains, and that's what mountaineering is all about. Coming away from it all and surviving, if possible, and enjoying what you've done, and going through a set of shared experiences. And we've all had shared experiences of various kinds, whether as students or as sons or colleagues, mountaineers, friends, whatever. And so let's get on with this panel and hear some of those stories. Thank you. We've been scrupulously hiding the book outside. Now you can see it.
I'm going to now start our discussion. The idea is within a very limited period of time, and there is no Q&A today. We want to bring to you some experiences, some memories from a very distinguished panel that we are very privileged to have here today, because they are very much not only part of the book but also great pioneers in their own right. And these memories are very fresh for them. So actually this opportunity is really very rare in Delhi. And by virtue of that discussion, then we would, I think, be able to introduce you to the book and the thoughts behind it. We're going to start today with Mr. Dubey. Mr. Dubey is known to most of you, and I think everyone knows everyone here. We're not looking necessarily to say more than that. Mr. Dubey was with our father Haridang on Nanda Devi in 1961, and also on Everest the next year in 1962. Both those experiences are individual chapters in this book.
And with me, Nanda Devi in 2001.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So actually, this is the first question I was going to ask Mr. Dubey, which, what's it about people who go to Nanda Devi and those who don't? It seems like the world is divided into two kinds, and Rupin is clearly, obviously, in that club. Mr. Dubey, once you go to Nanda Devi, Haridang, can I have a copy of the book, Rupin? Just pass it to me. These guys come back heartbroken. They come back sad, and it's something unique to Nanda Devi, because, and this is not an experience I have, by the way, because Haridang writes, the return from Nanda Devi is always sad, and one thanks the clouds that lend a softness to the mountains, that hide their beauty and give the grace of forgetting, that through all the lush rapture of flowers that grow knee-deep on the Alps of the Rishi, through the lazy forgetfulness of animal harmony, we were bound for the harsh world of conflict in the plains, where the careful balance of mind and body gained with much toil and perseverance would again be disrupted. The guy is heartbroken. Someone much before him, and you will recognize it, I will not accredit this because most of you should guess it. Return to civilization was hard, but in the sanctuary of the blessed goddess we had found the lasting peace, which is the reward of those who seek to know high mountain places. Exactly. So again, another heartbroken person. So my question for Mr. Dubey, what's so special about Nanda Devi that you come back heartbroken?
Thank you. Before I'll get to that in a minute.
Well, if you've lost a dead colleague, Mount Mia, that's one reason, but there may be others.
No, but there was no dead mountain. There was no dead mountain.
Not on our expedition. Mercifully. First of all, I just want to say I'm very pleased that this book has been published. When I think of Haridang, I think of 2 or 3 things, and I'll get to that if Himraj and Rupin want. But the one thing that I recognize about Hari a long, long time ago, and I have to say that my acquaintance, I knew him through most of our lives, but I knew him best of all in the years that Himraj has said. He didn't teach me. I was at Doon School. I left the year when he joined, the year before he joined as a master. But we were on Nanda Devi in 61, and that was 10 weeks away from civilization. By the way, I did want to say when Himraj said that we all know each other, it's probably because I think we are all a part of the Khan Market gang here. At least I see many fellow Khan Market visitors. So Hari was first and foremost a man who was extremely well read. I was 18 years old when I first met him, and he was 7 years or 8 years older. And the conversations between Haridang and John Dias and Gurdial Singh, all 3 people, there were 2 other members who like me, were not as well read, were always erudite, philosophical, otherworldly, if you like, down to earth. I mean, these were fascinating. And now, I'm going to get to your question in a minute.
This is fine. We can do that in time.
The thing about Nanda Devi is, and this is, okay, let me answer that question. There is no mountain that I know, and of course there may well be in Tibet and elsewhere. Every mountain range has been more or less thoroughly explored. But there isn't a natural phenomenon of the kind that Nanda Devi presents. Look at it as a kind of inverted E. The middle prong has Nanda Devi east on the outer rim and Nanda Devi in the middle. And then the 2 arms of the E go all the way around, and they're penetrated and they're broken only where the Rishi Ganga goes out. I don't think there's a map in this book, but if you look at them on Google Earth or some maps, you'll see that the Rishi Ganga drains a huge basin. And the mountain range that encloses that mountain, the mountain peaks that enclose it, the 2 arms that enclose it are impenetrable except to mountain climbers. And it was only in 1933 that Eric Shipton and Tillman and 3 Sherpas, including Amthake, who was with us on Everest in 62, actually made the first penetration. A lot of people had tried, off the Rishi Ganga into the basin that is now known as the Nanda Devi Sanctuary, the north and the south Rishi Ganga glaciers. So there is, the first thing that there is about this, it is a paradise because the Rishi Ganga Gorge is an incredibly difficult terrain, and it's not easy to walk in. We were the 6th or 7th, I think, trip in, and there was no path. I'm talking about 1933 to 61. The Guru had been, Gurdial Singh had been 60, the French had been, Nanda Jayal had been 57, 51, and in the 30s and 33, 36, or whatever it was, there wasn't a path. When Rupin and I went in 2001, there was a fairly well-trodden path for much of the way. So the first thing is this impenetrable. And the second thing about Nanda Devi is when you sit at the base in the sanctuary, you've come through this gorge 8, 9, 10 days through vertical cliffs, climbing up and down, and suddenly you have this huge pasture land. It's really incredible when you cross the last range and you have these grasslands suddenly stretch out in front of you. And rising 10,000 feet, you can imagine this like a cathedral, is this beautiful mountain which soars straight above you. And in no picture that I've got, and I've taken so many, does justice to this. You have to stand there and look up 50 degrees and you see the summit of Nanda Devi more or less vertically above you.
A bit like this photograph.
Totally like this photograph. Except that, foreshortening in a photograph makes it difficult to. So that's what is magical about this mountain. Its remoteness, its beauty, its ethereal beauty, and the fact that it dwarfs everything that any living creature that goes near it. So I think that's one reason.
Perfect. Now I think that explains why I think those people who have had that exposure, and I can see in Haridang's writings as well, you come back so changed, and you come back actually really sad to have come back because nothing matches up with that probably for the rest of your life. And I think some of that is captured here in this book. The one other question I had for you, which was sort of a mystery, because when you went in there first, you tried to climb Nanda Devi because that was your principal objective, and you found that as you moved up from Camp 1 to 2, it was all ice. It was very hard to make a campsite.
Well, what happened was, there were 6 of us. We we were 10 weeks in the basin. We had to leave a lot of stuff behind because we couldn't get enough porters, enough help to walk us in. We used goats, and goats can only carry 5 kilos on either side of their spine. So everything had to be broken. So we were really under-equipped and we were underfed, I think. This mountain is almost 8,000 meters. And I think we realized very quickly that the monsoon was early that year, that if we were to commit ourselves completely to this, we might eventually reach it, but then we would have spent so much time and energy in doing this that we couldn't explore the rest of the sanctuary. So when we found that the going was tough with all these obstacles that Hari writes about, we decided, okay, we'll come back to Nanda Devi another year, but let's go climb some mountains that we can enjoy, and we had 10 weeks of great fun. But that was it.
So my question was, had you reversed the order? Had you in fact gone and climbed Devistan and Kohli or whatever else you wish to climb first, by then the Nanda Devi might have become...
Well, it took us 3 weeks to get into the basin instead of 10 days because we had to double carry.
Didn't have porters.
So we didn't have porters. We had to do double carries. We had to come back in ferry loads.
Right.
So we were delayed. So had we gone to the lower peaks, we would have been washed out on Nanda Devi, which is very high.
Got it. Now, I think I might have interrupted you, but you were mentioning some things about Haridang and this era.
Yeah, I wanted to say this about Hari. Firstly, he was extremely well read. The second thing is, as you see in this book, he wrote beautifully. He has a detachment, he has a way with words, and he has a huge amount of learning in him. A lot of reference, and ideas, and he's extremely sensitive to where he is. So I find it extremely engaging to read what he writes and the way he writes it. The second thing I want to say about Hari is that he was one of the toughest people that I ever met. He was a very, very strong climber, and Mohan will, I think, having been near the Everest summit with him, will second this. The Nanda Devi Gorge, and I'm not going to talk about Everest, let Mohan do that. The Nanda Devi Gorge means climbing 2,000 or 3,000 feet up and down all the time to try and bypass cliffs and find your way in. Those were days when hunting for the cooking pot was an accepted thing. We're talking about 1961. Hari would get up in the morning, take one person with him, and shoot off up the hills, up the cliffs. And once in a while we'd hear the reverberations of a shot. And we'd say, we're going to have fresh meat today. It happened 3 times that we did. A lot of them missed. But on one trip I went with him. We were at a place called Dharashi, and there is a young lady here who has that name. We were camped there, and Hari said to me, he said, will you come with me tomorrow? I'm going to try and shoot something. So I said, okay. He says, you better carry a rifle. I said, I've never fired a rifle. He said, just carry it. Doesn't matter. So I put a rifle on my shoulder and walked with Hari. And we walked up these cliffs, traversed them, and after a very long, sweaty and tiring day, we didn't see a puddle, we didn't see a thar, we didn't see anything. We joined camp. But he was like, this was his normal day. So he was extremely tough, and you'll see that examples of that in the book. He and Nima going off, Nima the Sherpa, going off somewhere, Bujgara, which if you ever look at Bujgara, you'll see it's just vertical cliffs above there. These are the things that stood out with him. He climbed in the mountains with such intensity and dedication. He suffered no fools. There were quite a few moments where, people didn't live up to his expectations, both on Nanda Devi and Everest, and they got quite an earful. But it was a marvelous learning experience to be with him.
Perfect. I think that captures just a fraction of your Nanda Devi experience and something about Haridang as well. So let's move to Everest. Yeah. So I think that's sort of broadly the format with which we'll explore the Everest chapter here as well. I don't think, I can't imagine that so soon after Nanda Devi they would be going on an expedition again, but I think this is what happened. Of course, they were well prepared. There's a photograph in the book of Mr. Gurdiyal Singh, whom many of you would know, Mr. Dubey, and Haridang meeting, I think, on Mr. Gurdiyal Singh's 90th birthday in 2014. So I think Haridang's presence on that expedition was probably a result of a recommendation from Gurdiyal Singh. And I think some 2 British masters were found. Mr. Lalit Mehra has informed us in the Blue School Weekly, so that they could take leave from the school and absent themselves. And so off they go to Everest, and a lot of description in this book about I think they leave Delhi in February. Can you imagine? The climb is in May, they leave Delhi in February because it takes so long to take the trains and get through Nepal and walk up. I assume that was good for fitness, but he describes it like walking in the middle of Napoleon's army. It's logistically very difficult when 500 people are sort of walking.
We had 600 porters.
600 porters, there you go. And so you have to be really very far ahead or very far behind for various reasons.
Not in between.
Never in between. That he describes like being in the Paris metro.
Himraj, I just want to... almost the entire Nanda Devi expedition was invited to Everest because John Dias was asked to lead it, and John Dias was our member. So John Dias said, Gurdiyal, Haridang and me, please come with it.
Oh, that's right. That's the other connection. So it's not just the Gurdiyal connection, it's the John Dias connection. Actually, here's a very interesting point. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you. And I'm going to ask Captain Kohli this as well. I've been happy with Rupin to put out and complete this book of our fathers. Our father, as Mr. Dubey says, suffered fools very poorly. He had very few people he admired. Very few. That was just his nature. One of them was John Dias. He had uncritical, absolutely loving admiration for this man. And I wish we could remember and commemorate John Dias for great leadership, which comes through this book, sensitivity, great technical climbing, and apparently a terrific sense of humor. Now, I suppose all Garhwal officers have such qualities, but I think John Dias was exceptional. Mr. Dubey, any recollections of John Dias that you can bring to us?
John Dias used to carry a little book of Palgrave's poetry in his bag, in his backpack, and every time we sat down to rest, stop, walking on the approach march, either on Everest or on Nanda Devi, and these long days, he'd pull out this thing and start reading poetry. And he had a wicked sense of humor, and he always made jokes about. These are politically incorrect things, so I won't go into any details about the jokes. But he died of leukemia at a very young age in 1965. His last letter to me, he was in the US and he was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was in Cambridge, and we used to write in those days. Of course, it took 3 weeks to 10 days to get a letter. So we used to be constantly in touch. And his last letter to me, he spoke about something's wrong with my blood. It must be thinking too much about women.
So here we are with Captain Kohli. It's a real privilege to be able to talk to him because, to be really honest, all these years with our father, neither Rupin nor I have had any conversation about Everest, and certainly not about the difficult and very painful episode he had there, which he's captured in an article which some of you may have read called Nights of Agony. It was very painful for him. It also, I think, there was a physical cost to it. I think he never felt so troubled and had never had such a difficult time, not only physically but also mentally. It was a great mental challenge to undergo that suffering. Maybe he made harder of it than the others, but it'd be interesting to hear Captain Kohli's perspective. Was it as hard for you, sir? The times you spent between 28th, 29th and 30th May. Was that a very difficult moment for you as well? When you were in that camp at that very great height with just god-awful weather. The weather between the 25th and the 31st of May, I don't think any expedition had such bad weather, because he writes almost with envy that the Swiss walked up in shirt sleeves. The Americans are also in very light clothes. Yeah, but these guys really suffered. They were strong, they were fit, they were well equipped. Of course, the oxygen was short, which was...
Socks were short, the dry socks were short.
But if you had good weather, you wouldn't need to go to day 3 or day 4, right? So was it as hard for you as well? Was it a very difficult moment for you?
Well, my memory is not as strong as it used to be. But what I remember now is that 3 nights we spent at 28,000 together. I think this is perhaps the only time in the history of mountaineering that somebody has spent 3 nights at 28,000 feet. So those 3 nights were really memorable. And one night I remember our second night, oxygen was finished. And we had just 1 bottle of oxygen with 1/3 full, and the other had half full. So 1/3 we gave it to Sonam Gyatso, that you use this exclusively. And Hari and I decided that we will share it 15 minutes each. That was a very memorable scene, because Hari never used to give me back. I used to tell him that 15 minutes are over. He said, no, it's only 5 minutes. I said, no, 15 minutes. So I used to take it back. Then after 5 minutes, he would repeat the same thing. He said, now my turn. Now. So whole night we were taking turns and sharing the same 1/2 oxygen bottle between 2 of us. I think that memory still is intact in my mind.
Thank you for mentioning that. It is described as such in the book as well. Apparently this 1/3 bottle of oxygen he considered his sole link to sanity, because at that point, with lack of oxygen and extremely cold weather, they were really having a mentally difficult time, and this competition with Captain Kohli, their interchange is described very in great and painful detail in the book. I think it's a worthy read, and obviously they got along and they met again and had a few drinks. It wasn't the end of the world. But did you feel cheated in a sense that the weather was so against you? Did you feel that in some sense the fates were against you, or is that just the acceptable risk in mountains?
Well, we had a bad luck with the weather, because once second night when we left, after second night for the summit, we were doing quite well. In fact, we were thumping each other, well done, we'll be soon on top of the world. And we were 100% confident that nothing will stop us. And suddenly when we were just below the south summit, the weather turned bad and it became difficult to move even a step further. I remember within half an hour we took only about 10-20 steps. So we felt that time has come, then we can't continue. So, but Hari was very confident to continue, and so was Sonam Gyatso. But my calculations showed that it was not possible. It was possible to reach the top, but coming back would have been impossible, and we would have died on return from the summit. So, but Sonam Gyatso and Hari were both very confident, and they were keen to continue. So I remember I shouted, Hari, stop. He won't listen. There was a strong wind was this way. Then I had to shout at the pitch of my voice, Hari, stop. So finally they heard me, they stopped. I said, look at your watches, what time it is now? They said 3:30 p.m. I said, what time did we leave the last camp? He said 7 o'clock. I said, that means 8.5 hours are over and we have not even gone half the way. What time will you get to the top? They said, after 6 p.m. Then I said, how about coming back? Don't you want to come back? Well, they both thought. They said, coming back, we may not come back. So I said, then why continue? So they both agreed and we moved back. At 8 p.m., it became pitch dark. And at 8 p.m. that day, I remember we couldn't see a thing. So Ari and I had a quick discussion. I said, if we stand, we'll fall 10,000 feet. We'll go straight to the advanced base camp of Everest. So he said, best thing is let us sit down. So we sat down and we took one step each, sitting down. And then Sonam Gyatso came. He said, this is the best thing we can do. Even sitting is dangerous because if we slip, because in between, Ari slipped for a minute and he was going down to advanced base camp. So fortunately my ice axe went into the hard ice and stopped it. Anyway, after that, all three of us realized that standing is not possible. We sit down, not only sit down, but crawl. So we started crawling. And I think from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. we were crawling. At 10 p.m. suddenly I saw a shade coming in front of me. I didn't sort of realize what it could be. And then I got up and I tried to touch it. It was our tent. So that is how we survived. We could only remove our crampons, all three of us, with boots on. We went into the sleeping bags and we don't know what happened. We slept like logs, and next morning we walked down to South Call where Gurdiyal Singh was waiting. I think Sumi you had just left the South Call. It was one of those moments when there's very little chance of survival, but we survived.
So had you not found the tent and had you carried on to the South Call, the chances would have been pretty slim as well, right?
Right.
Because finding that tent was critical. I think he writes that one of you wanted to curse the tent and say, let's move 10 feet away. I think it's the tent. It has to be the tent. If it's not the tent, I'll curse it and come back. Actually, it turned out, as you say, to be the tent. And had you took a shortcut down on the way down. That didn't delay you, right? Because on the way up you had taken a different approach. On the way down you had taken the shortcut. That was not an obstacle. It was really the time and the hour. And I think Rupin and I are grateful that you turned them back. I think Maninder and Ravinder would also be grateful that you turned them back. That is why you came back, and that's a great decision you took. I think you have brought for us a very painful episode alive, and I think he writes in the book, which I think is very interesting for us to discuss. He says it would have been great to be successful, to have succeeded, but it was almost as good to have deserved to have succeeded. And they learned a lot, and then obviously history changed in '65. Obviously Haridang was not there, but that moment in '62 is captured in the book and has been wonderfully presented by Captain Kohli. Any questions for Captain Kohli on that? I think we're very grateful that you could describe this to us. We'd never discussed this with our father because it was so painful for him.
You know, there is something which I just want to add on. Good evening, everybody. You know, this episode, firstly, I must share with you that to see Captain Kohli here and Suman Dubey. You know, they are the pioneers. And whatever today Indian mountaineering is, a lot of it is courtesy. Our ancestors in climbing, and two of them are sitting right here, Captain Kohli and Suman Dubey. You know, this attempt on Everest in 1962 is perhaps unmatched in the annals of Indian mountaineering. Because Mr. Hari Dang was actually not supposed to be part of this attempt. He replaced Mr. Gurdial Singh, and he was actually to get back to Camp 5 that day. And suddenly he was told that he had to actually go up. All three of them were in this, in those days they had these small British meat tents where they were. And they were precariously anchored onto that slope. Today when you climb Everest from that route, ropes are fixed. There's a proper fixing of the route. So even a non-climber can actually go up. But these three gentlemen, Sonam Gyatso, Captain Kohli right here, and Mr. Hari Dang, were actually climbing roped up. I repeat, they were climbing roped up, which implies that there was actually no safety line for them. Three of them purely relying on their technique, their ability to climb, their ability to see in that weather. The visibility was bad. They were removing their glasses and cleaning it to see what was ahead, and they moved on. I think it is a tremendous effort, and it is just unfortunate that they were just short of the south summit. And as Captain Kohli brought out, it was a very good mountaineering decision to actually turn back, because you always live to climb another day. But this attempt, to my mind, is unmatched. And excepting, I think, one odd time where someone has bivouacked for one night by a British team in 1975 between the south summit and the main summit, this kind of stay at 27,650 feet, what is actually given in the book, is a record. Is a record by itself. In the limited oxygen, they had 2 butane canisters. They had one bag of plastic in which they actually put in ice, and they survived. It just shows that how strong they were, how compatible they were. And Mr. Dang has written in this book that had they turned back, it would have actually amount to letting the team down. They said, for the sake of the team, we must give it a shot. So that was their camaraderie, that was their teamwork, that was their commitment to each other. And I think, sir, it's a great honor to see Captain Kohli, who was there, as part of this trio, and of course, Suman Dubey.
Thank you, Ashok. You've been on the mountain.
I am reminded of one incident which I think will be worth mentioning. When we were coming, before we found the tent, we were on the south summit coming down on the ridge, and the ridge was very thin. Any fall would have taken us down to advanced base camp at 21,000 feet. And there I remember at least three occasions when Sonam, Hari and I decided that no use trying. We cannot survive. We have to be sort of give our lives here. So we were three times we were choosing our place. Okay, this will be my last place of burial. I will give up my life here. And I was trying to scratch to make a little pit there. All three of us had reached that stage on that particular evening.
Very hard to say anything after that. But to continue, Mr. Dubey mentioned something about John Dias. Could you bring to life anecdotally the greatness of Sonam Gyatso, whom you knew so well? Sonam Gyatso. Anything you can tell us about Sonam Gyatso?
Sonam Gyatso was he was undoubtedly the greatest mountaineer we had. And to describe him in 3 words, I can say, he can eat, he can sleep at any altitude.
And snore, I'm told.
And snoring, of course, was he had no difficulty in sleeping, whether it was 28,000. Whenever I was with him on the Annapurna also, he would be snoring and sleeping and eating at any altitude. He had no problem. He felt like as he's walking in Darjeeling or in Sikkim.
Any anecdotal memories? You were actually deputy leader in '62. How was your working relationship with Mr. John Dias? Anything you remember of John Dias that you can share? You knew him subsequently as well.
But John was a very lovable man. I think Mulki also knows him well. John was very lovable, and he and I had become almost like brothers, and we had no problem at any stage. And John was very affectionate, and he, of course, I had a good experience of Everest. In 1960 also I went there, and John had come for the first time. So he had a great faith in me, and he trusted me in whatever I proposed. He said, continue. And so we had that sort of relationship.
That's a lovely set of recollections, Captain Kohli. We truly are privileged to hear this from you directly. Obviously, some of this is in the book, but it doesn't come out with as much color as when you describe it. So I will describe to you an introduction that Mr. Singh, Mr. VP Singh and our father were in St. Stephen's College, just joined in the first year of college, and they go off in 1953
The hiking club contingent sitting
Yes, the hiking club contingent is here. They go off in 1953 to climb Bandarpunch. Courtesy Mr. VP Singh meeting Jack Gibson at some school prize distribution function at modern school. Ashok is a modernite as well. And what's interesting about this, and then we'll ask Mr. Singh to respond, is not going to Bandarpunch. Yes, they go to Dehradun and they meet Jack Gibson, they meet Gurdial Singh, wonderful. And Mr. VP Singh can tell us about the episode of meeting Jack Gibson and what he does for them. Then they go to Chakrata, which is fine. You go to Chakrata with Hoshar Singh, their valet. But then they spend 2 weeks getting to Osla. 2 weeks walking in the Middle Hills just to go where we would today reach in less than 2 days or 2 days or so. So think of the adventure of 1953 where two young lads, 18 years old, with money earned from writing articles. I think a funding that came from Himachal, which you can remind us of, which later have found the hiking club at St. Stephen's, and they go off here. So I think it's extraordinary adventure for young people, and we are very lucky that Mr. Singh can be here with us. Leave it to you to describe the recollections as you wish.
Well, after listening to Everest and Nanda Devi, this should seem like a cakewalk. But as he says that we had, I must emphasize this, Hari had about 200 rupees with him, I had about the same amount. And then luckily for us, there was a gentleman who's still around, a very fine person called Veerbhadra Singh, who was the chief minister of Himachal for many years. He loaned us or gave us 250 rupees. So in other words, we had a total of about 600 rupees. And then when we were going, my mother said to me, who's going to carry all your stuff? So I said, well, nobody will carry the stuff ourselves. We carry 60 pounds weight. And she smiled and said, I don't think you each will be able to carry that much. So why don't you take our domestic servant with you? He's from Garhwal. So I summoned him and I said, you know, we are going to this expedition and it's way up in the Garhwal area, and but it means that he's carrying a lot of weight and climbing. So he had the habit of twirling his moustache, and he did that, and he said, Saab, jo marzi, jahan marzi chale jao, मैं आपके साथ जाऊंगा, आपके आगे जाऊंगा, और जितना लोड दे सकते हो दे दो, मैं उसको उठा के ले जाऊंगा. So we were quite pleased about this, and we got him as a sort of porter. Then, as been said, I don't think it took us 2 weeks from Jakarta, but it's a long trip. We bussed up to Jakarta, and it was the time of the year when I have to mention this, that we didn't see a single person trekking at that time. Throughout our almost 4 weeks in the mountains, we didn't see a single trekker.
But the Doskos did some damage to you, I'm told.
Talking about the Dune School, Hari taught in the Dune School. I think he was the principal.
No, he wasn't the principal. He was a teacher there for 13 years.
The problem with the Dune School was that they had earlier in that particular year tried to climb the Black Peak, and there was a whole group of them, and each individual contributed, or the school contributed, 700 rupees per person. And so that was the kind of, they had cooks and they had tents and they had the works with them. And let me just get back a little bit to the fact that we had one ice axe between the two of us and nothing else. So we said we'll go to the Dune School and request them to give us some equipment. I had known Jack Gibson earlier. Let's say met him. So we went to the Dune School and we borrowed an ice axe, we borrowed a nylon rope and so on and so forth. We even met Gurudayal Singh, although Hari in his book mentions him in passing. But there is no question in my mind, and I'll come to that a little later, that if you have school teachers and they are the caliber of Gibson and Gurudayal, you have to consider yourself extremely fortunate, because these people not only thorough gentlemen, they were perhaps the most compassionate people that I have ever met, and I'm talking of 67 years ago. Well, we went on this trek, and we had lots of ups and downs, and Hari and I both had tempers, and we had fights, and this, that, and the other, but we had this single determination that we would try and climb the Black Peak. By the time we got to Osla, which was sort of the last village, and I must share this with you, the villagers believed not in the Pandavas, but in the Kauravas. They were worshippers of Duryodhana. So it's one of those areas in the hills, and we know so little about them.
Beautiful temple there. Beautiful temple to them.
Yeah, we didn't have time to go there. But when we got there, we just couldn't get, we needed supplies for the trip, because after that there was no village, no nothing. And everything was ridiculously priced. And we realized that we couldn't afford it. And they said, "Ki, aap kya keh rahe ho? Wo Dune School ki party aayi thi yahan pe. वो तो 200 रुपए देते थे कुलियों को, आप क्या दोगे हमको?" We said, "We'll give you $20." Yeah, big law. And then Hari mentioned this. I thought that this was getting us nowhere. So I used to be very fond of Shakespeare. So I just rattled off, sitting there and all the kids and the women and men around. I started reciting Shakespeare. And some strange thing happened, that many of these people got their drums and dholkis out. And as I recited Shakespeare, they went bang, bang. And we have, Hari and I are looking at each other and saying, "What's going on here?" Anyway, the result was that we managed to get a coolie, one person. And we got not too many vegetables, but Hari mentions 2 pumpkins, which feature, or 2 or 3 pumpkins, I'm not quite sure. when we started what was the actual going to the base of the mountain, and to be honest, by that time we were already pretty tired out. And we went there, and old Singh was carrying his load of stuff. So we then carried up the Tormes River to a point. It's very difficult for me to tell you exactly what heights we were in, because we had no meters with us. But this is in the month of September. I have seen photographs in the month of May and June, and the snow is right up to almost to touching the Black Peaks ridge. And here we were, there was no snow at all, except the glaciers from Swargarohini, which is a mountain peak on the left-hand side, which we could see. So then we crossed the moraine of the Bandarpunch glacier and found ourselves in a shepherd's hut. Not a hut, it was a kind of a dugout with
Khadka. He calls it a khadka. Khadka.
with slabs of rock on it. So we made that sort of our base camp. And then Hari doesn't mention this, but then for 2.5 days we had incessant rain and snowfall. And we ran out of food. I mean, the pumpkins were still there, and Pratap Singh would cook the food, and we would have gulps of tea, and we'd have this pumpkin and chapatis to eat. So finally, when we thought that there's not much time left, we better make an attempt for the summit. And we tried to do that. And but we realized halfway through that we wouldn't be able to make it, so it was pointless. But we carried on walking, and talking of turning back, I have to say this, that I think it was wise on our part. And mind you, we're talking from 27,000 feet to about 16, 17, and maximum 18,000 feet. And because if we had carried on for another 2 hours, it would have been very difficult for us to get back the same night to our tent, which in a minuscule way compares with what they did up in the mountains over there.
He writes that it was very painful to turn back there as well, because you guys were very keen to get to the summit, and then when you came back you started arguing and he started complaining about the lack of equipment. What were you arguing about?
That's a good question. You know, both Hari and I we were people with the temper. So
Oh, we hadn't noticed. We hadn't noticed. Dangs have tempers, Mr. Singh. Dangs have
no, Hari
tempers.
and we both had bad temper. In fact, there's a particular point in the book which I have to correct. There's a time when Hari says that I lost my temper with Hoshiyar Singh, and I dropped my haversack, and he dropped his load, and I chased after him. It wasn't Hoshiyar Singh I was chasing, it was Hari Dang. But this happens, and and I have to say this, that Hari then went on to great things, and I've been through this book, and I never realized what a legend he was. And I would submit to all of his people who he taught and people who were his friends, that you have to read this book to find out what kind of person Hari Dang really was. Because for me, it was a revelation to read this book and say, oh my God, I looked at him, we both said the same age, and both pretty tough, and with absolutely no equipment, 2 ice axes and a nylon rope, that's it. But I would say this to all youngsters and to all alumnus of the schools that he taught. They should buy this book and read it to find out more about what Haridang was all about. And I say this with some regret that I never really got to meet him afterwards. And I, for very commercial reasons, went and joined the Imperial Tobacco Company way back in 1955 and missed out on all this. And this is something that I probably regret all my life.
But we won't regret having you on this panel and bringing us back to, after the more serious Everest discussion, to remind us of young Haridang and young BP Singh at the age of 18 in the Tons Valley. One last thing, if we can ask you, sir, since this is Stevens College Hiking Club members are here, introduced to us through Mr. Sudhir Sahi, who is here. Did you have a role in the formation of the hiking club or in its early years? When you came back from Bandarpunch?
This is a question that I hesitate to answer. Because yes, there was, I was asked repeatedly whether I would become the secretary of the hiking club to start this hiking club. And I was hesitant to take on a, quote, admin position, because it meant that you then were responsible for all sorts of things that you had to organize and all. And I said no to it. But I am not entirely sure as to when the hiking club was formed. Or am I imagining this? But it was formed, and I think it became a very active hiking club. And I'm sure, are you guys members of the hiking club? You must not let the fact that you have no equipment stop. But you must always have resources enough that you have enough to eat. And you are physically fit all the time. There is no fun going mountain climbing if you're not physically fit. So my advice to you guys would be, go ahead and do this. Do the best you can, but make sure that you are fit.
Good.
I think 1959, I was invited by the St. Stephen Hiking Club to give a talk on climbing Nanda Kot. So 59 it was existing.
Yes.
Was
It
it
might have
there?
started
You were also there.
Yeah, we had you come for Nandakot, I was there, and we had Brigadier Gyan Singh. Brigadier Gyan Singh could only 60 Everest. He could only come at 7 in the morning. So I said, how are we going to get an audience at 7 in the morning? He was traveling somewhere. And would you believe it, there were 300 people at the Gyan Singh talk on 60 Everest expedition at 7 in the morning.
Tremendous. Something more to do.
Sorry, yes, please.
I said something of the roots earlier. I must say this to you. When we returned to Dehradun, we went back to Mr. Gibson to return the equipment we had borrowed. And we must have been stinking. But as we walked in, Mr. Gibson got up and said, you have the scent of the pine. And then he chatted, and then he said, and this is something, mind you, it's 67 years ago. And then he said, I have some work to do, but there is some refreshment for you here, and you should partake of this. So he went off, and Hari and I walked into the dining room. And on this table, there was a cake, there was cheese, there was ham, there were 3 loaves of bread. You name it, and it was on that.
Marmalade, I'm told marmalade was there. Marmalade and brown bread.
And he and I finished every morsel on that cake. And I have never ever sort of forgotten the fact that, as I said, that he was really one of the finest people that I have ever met. And so good luck to those doom school boys who had him as master.
Money divided.
So that makes up for the criticism of the Roscoes for raising the rates with the porters. On that pleasant note, let's move to Brigadier Ashok Abbey. And the three previous speakers had actually walked with and travelled and climbed with Haridang. Brigadier Abbey's case is a different case. And we thought that he would help us on this panel for a few reasons. Brigadier Abbey is actually a graduate from the Garhwal School of Mountaineering. He does something very interesting. When you read his articles, you read his writings, he discusses the history, he discusses the pioneers, he discusses the ecology of where he's going, the culture, the language. He does very serious research. And he combines it with the institutional capacity of the army, or the Nehru Institute, or the Ladakh Scouts, or the Dogras, or all the NSG recently in Everest this summer. So this combination of his, what I would say, sensitive, almost schoolmasterly mountaineering with all the institutional strength as well has really led him to do some very interesting things. And we thought we should influence him, that when his writings come, they may be influenced by towards a slant towards the idealistic rather than the institutional. And he has met Haridang at various times in Harsil and Uttarkashi, and their conversations would be worth recounting. He immediately reacted to this last chapter, which frankly even I in the book cannot understand very clearly, but it will come over time, called Unclimbing the Mountains. And it has something to do with the fact that we have discovered the world, we discovered every pass, every valley, every peak, and what is there now for young generations to come. And I think he will have some response to us on that. He's also uniquely positioned that he has visited almost every part of the Indian Himalaya, and I thought I would challenge him to remind us which he likes the most and why. With all that, up to you, Ashok.
Thank you. Before I do that, Himraj, I would like to congratulate you, Rupin, and the entire Dang family for bringing out this book. You've compiled it, you've edited it, and I can see some good photographs of Mr. Dang taken by Vibha and Ahelia. So you just captured, the moment. And when I last met him, of course, in Uttarkashi before I left the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering, he was very much that boisterous self on the banks of Bhagirathi River with a pipe in his hand. He had that old jacket of his, which he was wearing in the 60s, and he was carrying that aluminium, that framed rucksack. And it was a treat to see him, because after seeing him, those who were with me, we were all joshed up that here is a man who is coming to the Himalayas regularly. And I also know now why the mountain virus runs in the Dang family. Okay? Because the Dang family, they were there for the years that I spent in Uttarkashi, in about 9 years in my 2 tenures. They were there very, very often. The whole family would come together and they would all go and do their respective treks. A family truly which loved the mountains from every aspect that you can look at. So now I know Himraj and Rupin, and of course the next generation of the Dangs, and why you keep frequenting. Before I come back to your questions, let me also just say very briefly about this book. That, I've read a lot of books, I've studied a lot on Everest and a whole lot of mountains. They talk about the climbs, routes, history, chronicled, etc., etc. But very few books actually touch the crux as to why we climb. Why are we there in the mountains for the first place? Why are we there? What is it that the mountains bring to us? What is it that we can expect from them? And I think Mr. Dang has covered it beautifully. And like Mr. B.P. Singh said, that the younger generation, for them it's a must read to see the philosophy behind it and how mountains can actually take you and elevate you, So it's a great environment, and absolutely, I don't think there's any other better landform in the mountains. Of course, we all have our takes on this. Coming on to the question of unclimbing the mountain. So when I read this chapter, And I was quite amazed that generally everyone talks of climbing the mountains, and Mr. Dang says, unclimb the mountains. Now, how do you unclimb the mountain? It's a very challenging subject, A mountain which is climbed, which has been recorded in history, and people have gone over and over it again. So how do you unclimb a mountain? And why should you unclimb a mountain? His logic is very clear and very straightforward and straight from the heart. In fact, in this book, he's recounted an incident, where he's talking to one of the ex-boys at the Doon school in Dehradun, and he tells Mr. Dang that, look, Mr. Dang, sir, you have done everything that your generation wanted. You've climbed the mountains, you've explored the hills, you've gone down the rivers, you've gone down the forest, but what have you left for us? What do I tell my children who are more into watching, Bollywood and the internet and the fun games, etc.? He says, you've left nothing for them. And perhaps as a good schoolmaster and a man who understands probably the generation of children like no one else, he probably wrote this piece, Unclimbing the Mountains, and perhaps it is time for us to unclimb these mountains. Now, how do you do that? He's been very simple and straightforward. He says that to unclimb the mountains, you need to firstly lessen the footprint. How do you do that? You actually talk less about them. You kind of mutate the achievements which have been accomplished, not in the physical sense, but in a sense that when you present it to the new generation, it is as if these are unclimbed. The forests, the rivers, today because of the commercialization, people are moving everywhere. So it is a big challenge to unclimb these mountains so that the younger generation can climb these mountains again, afresh. It's a fantastic, a piece which he's given us to think about. So what does one do? You have to remove the footprints, not physically, but again, mentally. Talk less about the bygone achievements. Conserve, get the environment back, get the forest back, get the animals, the flora, fauna back, and present it to a new generation so they too in their respective lives, the children, their children and their children can at least say that, look, the golden age of mountaineering went back in the 19th century in Europe. In the 20th century, it went back in the Himalayas, but still, for you, it is there. It is there for you to experience, learn firsthand and climb. So it's a very, very, challenging proposition. He also mentions this word called undelete. What is undelete? When you press a button in a computer, you delete something. But if you want to undelete that, you have a button where you can actually get back what you deleted. But how is this to be done in the mountains? And he says beautifully that we have to, the steps that we have taken to get them to this level, we have to take back. We have to encourage, we have to control, we have to conserve. And again, this generation must be told that you are as good as the pioneers and they must go with their minds afresh. So it is something which is, it's a tremendous challenge and he's put it up beautifully. I don't know whether I've been able to do justice to that. So the best thing that we can do is, as far as we are concerned, that when we climb these mountains, rather than just talk about the achievements and recording an ascent or a climb through a difficult phase, we need to just play it a little down. Play it a little down. Record it, but then don't tom-tom it too much. So it is a thought, it is a way ahead, and we have no option, because if these young girls and their children and their grandchildren are to see the Himalaya in all its pristine glory, well, this just has to be done. Otherwise, I am afraid they will have really no place to go, because every valley, every river, every forest would actually be climbed by that time. So I hope that answers your question.
You've done more justice to this thought than I could have. Thank you for thinking this through in great detail.
Just finish
yes, of course.
that last bit of the question. It's a tough call to actually take that which is the most favorite area of the Himalayas. Very difficult. As a soldier, I've served in Arunachal, climbed, Sikkim, climbed, Uttarakhand, it's been my home for 9 years, spent all my life in Kashmir, climbed in Himachal. Very tough call, but we are fortunate to have the Himalaya. So you can't say that which part of the Himalaya is the best. every mountain, every valley has its own charm. But certainly the grandeur of the Garhwal Himalaya, to my mind, is something, spectacular. It's enigmatic, and it is something which for a person like me, it attracts, it has a tremendous amount of attraction. But having said that, I am fortunate that I have also climbed in the Karakorums. I have served on the Siachen Glacier. I have climbed there, done about good 5 expeditions in the Indian side, and some of the highest mountains there. The Karakorums are actually unmatched, because the mustags that we have in India and Pakistan, we have just 3 with us and 4 are with Pakistan actually, POK. So the Karakoram, again, it's a grand range. It may not have the length and the dimensions of the Himalaya, but again, it's a fascinating range, and again, the mountains there are to be seen, to be believed. So it's a tough call, but I would say that Uttarakhand, of course, catches my eye, and similarly, the Karakorams are truly fascinating, truly fascinating.
Yes, Mr. Singh. And Dhruv, would you consider joining us now also? Go ahead, please go ahead.
Mentioned the Karakoram. Hari and I used to discuss this. I come from the northwest frontier and I was schooled in Kashmir. So when he talked about Amadablam and he talked about Bakaru and Everest and Choyu, I talked about Tirchmir, Rakaposhi, Kashabram, Mashabram, Ketu, Nanga Parbat. And it's unfortunate that these areas are, although it must be stated in absolute emphatically that this area belongs to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and it is under the illegal occupation of another country. So we hope that the army and the powers that be will one day sort things out. But he and I said this, that we would one day climb in the Karakoram. That, as I said, is a pipe dream. But I had mentioned this because the Karakoram is mentioned. And our family had estates in that area, in the Gilgit Bazaar. And I have never been there, but I've seen some photographs of it. And it's unmatched in terms of valleys and in terms of the scenery, etc.
Thanks for that intervention. Our last speaker, and this is a very short time, Dhruv, now because we are reaching the end of our panel. Dhruv has written a book called Grit.
Great Gravel and Gear.
Great Gravel and Gear. He's biked from Alaska to Peru, and he has yet to finish the journey down to Chile. 15,000 kilometers. I met Dhruv, who is from the Army Public School. I didn't know Dhruv. Rupin knows Dhruv. But I was at Mohit's place a few months ago, and Dhruv released this book. And I was shocked. I said, how can anyone do this? This is extraordinary. And then he said, someone asked him, so why did you do all this? You were an executive at Reebok and you had a regular life. Why did you give this all up and put yourself through so much hardship and so much achievement? He said, well, I had a teacher or a headmaster who once told me that, this is what I should do. I should have the courage to give it all up and go for adventure. So I was wondering who this headmaster or teacher would have been. And of course it was Haridang. And so Dhruv brings us to contemporary time, where some young person wanting to do something extraordinary does that. I think he exceeds his mandate, frankly. This guy has done something which is unimaginable in terms of achievement and risk, and also personal learning. We won't get into all that, but Dhruv, can you just, very briefly, summarize the thing you've done so people can follow your book, and also mention what role, if any, Haridang had to help you change gears in your life?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Himraj and Rupin, for having me here. It's a real privilege to be able to say a few words. I was in Army Public School in 1984, and that's the year Mr. Dang, I think, joined us. He was our principal, and he had a remarkable impact on my life. My outlook towards nature. I credit him with a lot of things that sort of shaped me as a leader, as an outdoorsman, which I discovered much later in my life, in my mid-40s, and then much later again. But the seeds of whatever adventures that I undertook in life, actually, he's the one man who is responsible for showing me the path, and to many others in the school. I clearly remember till today, we were amongst the first bunch of guys. We sent river rafting in India way back in 1985. We went skiing to Narkanda. We never even imagined that we would ever do something like that. And my love for mountains just grew. Being with him, I had earlier studied in Sherwood in Nainital, so I was already trail running. But my association with him as a headmaster, as a student, and as a mentor runs really deep. In 2016, after working for about 25, 26 years in the corporate sector, I decided to take a break from my life and embark on a journey which I thought would help me fulfill and understand the purpose of my life and understand what I'm all about and also explore. So I undertook a bicycling journey, solo, unsupported, from Dead Horse, Alaska, which is near the Arctic Ocean, to the Andes in Peru. I was alone, unsupported, and obviously I had all my gear on a bicycle, about 40 kilos of it. I cycled for about 15,000 kilometers for about 14 months. Camped, lived on the side of the highway, in the mountains, in the forests, and traveled the length and breadth of North America and then a bit of South America as well. It was an amazing experience. It opened my eyes to the world in a way that I could never imagine. With respect to our climate, the grandeur of the forest, talking to trees and stones and animals and bears, and also the amazing indigenous people that I met, and how it opened my eyes about what forgotten people they are, and including in our own country. Whether it was the Inuits or the Maya or the Aztec or the Inca, I met the descendants. Because I was not traveling too much into cities but through villages and the rural areas. So you do meet a lot of those kind of interesting people. I came back a year and a half later, and of course now I'm back in corporate India, much against my heart's wishes, but life has to go on, and I'm always ready to go back to the mountains, whether it's Sikkim or Arunachal or Uttarakhand, and continue my mountain biking pursuits.
Thank you, Dhruv.
It's all thanks to Mr. Dang, I would say, because he put that seed in my head and my life. Thank you.
And you had to pay the bills because I know you were running out of money and your mother was trying to buy you money and you were not getting visas. So I think this is a good phase for you as well, and there's a lot more we expect to hear from you. And just meeting you at Mohit's book launch that day reminded me we had to have you here today. So with that, we conclude our panel. I just want to mention two things. One is that I would like to give thanks to Dr. Rakshana Swami as well as to Vinay Malla of Thompson for helping us and guiding me particularly with something that we didn't really have much experience with in the world of publishing. I should mention that outside we have a visitors book where we would like to capture your emails and mobiles in case we do wish to reach you for anything else we might do. There's a lovely 2-pager outside which you can pick up with a letter written by Haridang in 1959, brought to our attention by Gurdiyal Singh, courtesy Montage, and a poem and a prayer on the reverse. There's a little card with which, if you want to circulate it amongst your friends, how you can order this book. We're also learning how to do it because we are not in the publishing or distribution game, but there are various options. And obviously the books are there. The last point is just, because I've been struggling with this question, Martin is always struggling with why do you climb mountains? Well, I asked this question, why do you publish a book 55 years later? You can read that afterwards. No, you can read that afterwards. I'll just finish this, you can read one of those. Why do you want to publish a book 55 years after the writer is gone, and why are we doing this? So the reason we did this, Rupin and I, there were 3 reasons actually. As you've seen with the evergreen memories of our panel, this captures some of their extraordinary pioneering experiences which are valuable for them and valuable for us. It also, I think, sends a message of how a young man with a pair of shoes and a rucksack can in fact go with very little money in his pocket and discover a world of adventure and make something of himself, which is exactly what he did. And I think for Rupin and me as well, because his voice it captures the words which will last now for a long time and for another generation. So for all those reasons we had to do this, and for all those reasons we are very encouraged that all of you would come here. Mr. B.B. Singh wants to conclude this program with some lines that he remembered from 3 years ago. Please go ahead, sir.
Of course, Captain.
There is one big achievement of Haridang, which not many people know, which I'd like to, I think, add. When we were at Advanced Base Camp on Everest, he had brought a typewriter with him, and he told me, he said, Mohan, I'm going to carry it to the South Col. I said, don't be funny, it's such a heavy thing. We even discard even half a kilo extra. He said, no, I'd like to carry it. And he did carry the typewriter to the South Col.
Where you got rid of it, I'm told. You at the South Col, you asked him to not carry. Enough by then. Please, Ashok, go ahead.
I just wanted to share one thing with you all in this book. I'm sure you would have heard all of these famous lines, what George Lee Mallory in 1923, when asked this question during his tour of the USA, said that why climb mountains? And he said, because. Why climb Everest? He said, because it is there. Mr. Dan, I don't know whether anyone has gone through this book. If you read that, what he's written here, he says, no, we climb Everest not because it is there or not because the mountains are there. He says, we climb because we are there. He says, we as humans make this possible because mountains are dead in the sense that they don't move, they don't feel. But he said it is the human, it is the human element, it is us, it is humans who actually make this change. So he says mountains are climbed not because they are there, but he says because we are there. And in that I think he's conveyed the undying spirit of adventure in man.
I had made notes as to what to say and so on. And then suddenly I somehow tucked away in my books was this bit. And the credit for this goes to these two young boys and the Dang family. And so the credit for this goes to the Dang family. And I just want to read this to you. He was last seen approaching the south face summit ridge as the monsoon clouds parted at 3:20 p.m. on 23rd July 2016. That is his obituary. And then below that it says, do not stand here and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glimpse on snow. This is Hari Dang. That describes it well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming, and let's give a round of applause to this wonderful panel.
Self-drive Jeep would be better. I don't know. With both of them.